Russ, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. First off, can you tell me a little bit about Melton's experiences with electronic driver logs? How long have you been on e-logs? How has it affected hours of service compliance and back office planning and productivity?
Well, hello, Seth, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Melton has been on the platform about 10 years. We made the jump early on. We knew at some point that it was coming. We didn't know exactly when, but we took the plunge, like I say, about 10 years ago. And it has been a pleasant experience for us. There's really been nothing unpleasant about it. And I will say, just quite simply and to the point, from an operations standpoint, it has made life much easier. Having visibility of all the driver available hours has certainly made planning very easy. So our back office has been fine. Obviously, there are learning curves. We'll go through some of that here in a little bit, but it's been fine for us. It hasn't been a real problem.
Okay. And really quickly, what would be some of your advice to the folks in the industry who are going through this for the first time or will be in the coming months? You guys have had some experience, but what would be your advice to the first-time adopters of e-logs out there?
Well, for the first time folks, I think it's important to just take a step back and make sure that your house is completely in order. You have to be a compliant carrier, whether you're on paper logs or you're on electronic platform, it doesn't matter. But you've got to make sure that you're compliant, your house is in order, and that everything is going fine on your end. If all of those things are going well for you, then you're not going to have near the problems. You hear a lot of carriers talking about a massive loss in productivity when they change over, but that's probably because they're not running correctly and they're allowing some things to go on in the paper environment that won't go on in the electronic environment. So we actually, when we converted 10 years ago, we actually had a slight increase in our overall productivity, which you didn't hear a lot of. It was about 1%. So it was almost nothing across the board from the standpoint. There certainly wasn't a huge decrease of any kind.
Okay. And how about your drivers? Going back 10 years or so, how did they take to e-logs when you made that transition?
Well, of course, with any change. I mean, I even remember back 20 years ago when we went to a satellite platform. There's always the conspiracy theories and the pushback and everything, but it wasn't tremendous. It's how you sell the program to your fleet. And if you sell it properly and you let them know that you're doing it with their best interest in mind, then it goes over much better. Don't treat anything like a jam down.
Yeah, okay. And then for the folks in the industry who have been using e-logs for a number of years, yourselves included in that, the ELD rule does include a grandfather clause for existing devices, generally categorized as AOVRDs, automatic onboard recording devices.
Correct.
So there's 2 extra years to comply with the technical specifications in the ELD rule. So there are, the question about, how fleets are going to make that transition from AOVRD to ELD. Some I hear are planning to make that switch pretty soon. Others plan to wait, most, if not all, of the 2 years and kind of let the dust settle. What's your perspective at Melton? What are your plans for moving from the AOVRD to the full ELD spec?
Well, Seth, early on, when we first started looking at it early this year, we thought we would probably be one of the carriers. We would just take the plunge right away and go straight into the ELD mandate. But since we've taken a little bit more of a look at it, and there are certainly no negatives involved other than just getting used to a couple of the different rule changes, I think we're going to probably grandfather. And I don't know if we're going to grandfather for the complete time. We do have plans to grow our fleet over the next 2 years. And doing so, then any new trucks that are added, net gains that come on, will go on to the ELD platform. And we've talked about that internally, whether it's viable to have trucks on two different platforms. We don't think it's going to be any problem if we do. And our feeling is it will give us a little bit more time to really ease into it and study the changes a little bit instead of just going all in.
Okay. And then you alluded to just kind of like the slightly different rule sets. what are the aspects of the ELD rule and ELDs that are a little bit different from AOVRDs that you're referring to?
Right. Well, the main one is the yard move. When they start talking about, any movement of the truck is going to start the driver's 14-hour clock. And so that's a little bit different in the yard move. And then maintenance personnel as well. If you're moving the truck, if maintenance personnel are moving the truck, you're going to have a way that they can code into the system, because you don't want to start the driver hours there. And then the entire, personal conveyance, that's a big one that's being talked about. And so that's a little bit different as well.
Yeah, I guess you see a benefit to letting some of the kinks be worked out as well when come December 18th. Much of the industry is making this transition, and perhaps you can learn from their experiences.
Yes, absolutely. And most of my peers that I have spoken with that are on the AOVRD platform probably are going to exercise the grandfather clause. There are a few that are not, but I think everybody's going to take more of the ease in approach into it, rather than going hardline. Now, folks that aren't already installed, they're going to go straight up on the ELD.
Right. Got it. And we've been talking about ELDs and the ELD mandate for years now. It's been a topic of discussion throughout the industry, and we're now finally we have a final rule, and we're getting close to the implementation date. We're now just about 4 months away from that December 18th deadline. So I want to get your thoughts now that we're almost there. How do you expect the industry as a whole to change come December?
Well, Seth, there's been, like you say, a lot of talk, and to this point, it's all speculation. No one really knows. Everyone's tossing around numbers that there's going to be a 3 to 5% loss of capacity. I don't know if it's going to be 2% or 20%. No one really knows till we get in. I don't think it's going to be as big of an impact, possibly, as some have said, but there will be some impact. And from our standpoint, we're ready. We've been getting ready for 10 years, if you will. So it's not going to change our lives when December 18th rolls around.
Okay. And I was wondering if you're hearing anything, perhaps from some of your shipper customers, who I hear anecdotally are starting to look at this and want to be proactive and make sure that their carriers are prepared for this and are running legally and ELD compliant when the mandate goes into effect. Are you hearing any of your shippers who are asking about that? Do you think that that's on their radar?
What's interesting, Seth, is there are a few that have actually reached out to us. We've been pretty proactive with our customer base, letting them know where we stand. We try to get out ahead of things a little bit, not keep anybody guessing. But some of the larger shippers that we have, larger customers, have actually reached out and have asked some very direct questions. And I think they're doing that, and they're smart for doing that, to make sure that their carriers are going to be properly lined up, because they don't want any big surprises, obviously, in December if they have been using someone that's not on the platform or can't get there fast enough. So we're starting to hear more and more of that going on out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And, I've made the argument that, and depending on who you are and if you're prepared and you're already using electronic logs, the mandate in many ways can be an opportunity. Especially if there is some tightening of capacity, perhaps some additional business goes the way of, some fleets that are, have been out there a long time, have a good reputation, and are fully compliant. Do you see it in the same way?
Well, I certainly have not looked at it from a negative standpoint. And once again, who knows what's going to happen if the economy, the economy this year in 17 has been certainly better than 16, at least in our world, in the flatbed business. It's been far better. And if the projections go into 18, if the economy continues to improve, then there's going to be a created capacity issue, especially over in flatbed, most likely anyway. And so trying to guess how much of that's going to be ELD caused and how much of it's just the economy increasing, I'll leave that up for the economists to figure out. But we're looking at it very positively, and there's nothing that you just said that's not true. I do anticipate there may be some guys that drop out, and whether it's the sectors that our customers are in, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see how it's going to go. You bet. It's been planned for years, and it's kind of interesting that it seems that some people have thought that it was going to go away, and they kept thinking, they kept thinking. You know, I know within the last month there was a bill that was introduced into the House of Representatives that it didn't make it into committee, so it's not going anywhere. And there have been several attempts, but I think barring a last minute something coming from maybe even as high as the White House, it'd have to come almost out of there to stop it. I think it's going, and so everybody needs to be prepared. It's coming.
Yeah, and it's just kind of looking at hours of service compliance in general. Perhaps we could quickly touch on that. In the concept that the ELDs will help level the playing field for hours of service compliance. Is that something that you do believe will make a real difference, and is it something you're looking forward to?
Absolutely. We have been, since we made the decision 10 years ago to install the electronic logs, we have been firmly behind it and believe that everybody should be on this platform. And it's the rule, and that's what everybody needs. Everybody needs to play by the same set of rules. And it promotes safety as well. I mean, it's everybody that's yelling and screaming that they don't like it probably has some other issues on their hands anyway.
Sure. And last question I'll leave you on here, Russ. Of course, many of the electronic logging systems that have been on the market for a while now do a lot more than electronic logs. I mean, the electronic logs are one piece of the services offered. Some of the newer vendors that are jumping into the market ahead of the mandate are, generally more basic products that maybe provide compliance only or compliance plus a few extra little features here and there. But at Melton, can you give me some examples of other types of applications and other ways that you're using your onboard technology beyond the e-logs?
Absolutely. And it's not necessarily connected straight into the e-log platform, but we have a lot of technology on board our trucks in general. We have forward and rear facing cameras, which I think are an absolute must. We've now installed the collision avoidance, roll stability on our trucks as well. I think that's certainly a piece that's coming. And we use the pre-clear system when we go approaching the scales. That's something that's running through the system as well. So I think you'll see more and more technology that's going to be developed out there that just makes it easier for the drivers. And we always look at any product that we purchase, the safety component and the driver benefit component. Those are the two things that we're looking at first to see how it will impact.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, Russ. This has been great input. It's fascinating to hear some of your thoughts, and I'm sure all of us here, all of us in the trucking industry in general, are very interested to see how this all plays out. And your experiences are certainly valuable to those who will be going through this for the first time. So thanks again for taking the time.
Well, you're welcome, Seth. And just like anything else, we're all going to live through this. Trust me.
All right. Thank you, Russ.
Thanks.